months ago, the United Nations issued a clarion call for peace. And not long ago, the United States brokered agreements to establish full diplomatic relations between several Arab nations and the Israelis. The agreements were named Abraham Accords to highlight the common belief of Judaism and Islam in connection to Abraham. Will there be peace, or will we see sudden destruction? Without a doubt, the so-called Middle East would be the number one region most people think of when world leaders talk about peace. Africa comes in at a close second. Listen to this from 1 Thessalonians 5:3. For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. So if we really believe that we're living in the last days, we should not be surprised about what is happening to create chaos in certain regions, especially the one they refer to as the Holy Land. Since 1948, European leaders have been desperate to get the surrounding nations to accept the newcomers, and it has not worked. So let's just do a quick summary and get into the backstory so that you understand the history of what happened. This comes from sixdaywar.org. It's entitled The Three No's of Khartoum. Now, after the Israelis won the Six-Day War in 1967, their defense minister, Moshe Dayan, said he was waiting for a telephone call from Arab leaders. He assumed that they would be ready to come to the table and talk peace after his state had just won this seemingly miraculous victory. But that didn't happen. It says, Israelis' belief that the war had come to an end and peace would prevail along the borders was quickly dispelled. 3 weeks after the conclusion of hostilities, the first major incident occurred along the Suez Canal. Meanwhile, from late June through July, the Soviet Union, determined to revive its influence and the confidence of its allies, Egypt and Syria, initiated a massive resupply of arms. This included the shipment of more than 200 crated MiG fighter jets in 2 weeks. And then on July 15th, 5 Arab leaders agreed on the necessary effective steps to eliminate the consequences of what they called imperialist Israeli aggression on the Arab homeland. They were basically saying, these folks are imperialists, and we need to get them out of our homeland. Egyptian President Nasser and other Arab leaders wanted to convince the world that they had been victimized rather than defeated. It goes on to say, regaining confidence, Nasser declared on July 23rd that he was preparing his armed forces to continue the battle against Israel. He says, we shall never surrender and shall not accept any peace that means surrender. So the leaders of 13 Arab states gathered at a summit conference in Khartoum, Sudan, from August 29th to September 1st. There they pledged to continue their struggle against Israel. Influenced by Nasser, their conditions were quite specific. Listen, no peace, no negotiations, and no recognition of Israel. And there has been upheaval in the region ever since. But this happened in Sudan. Now let's focus on Sudan. So bringing Sudan to the table was supposed to be the nail in the coffin per se. Back in 2020, Netanyahu hailed the the U.S. brokered agreement, calling it an incredible transformation. He said Khartoum's 3 no's have become 3 yeses. Just think about what was happening in October of 2020. Folks were not focusing on a peace deal. Nations were up to their eyeballs in rolling out the serum they wanted people to take. So in reality, the 3 no's Netanyahu was referring to did not become 3 yeses when you consider that the region is extremely volatile right now. Sudan is a nation we need to keep our eyes on. They didn't highlight that nation for no reason. Listen to this from Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. They made this announcement last month regarding Sudan, saying they were expanding the tent of the Abraham Accords. Now let's highlight some of the information from the article. It says Sudan's full entry into the Abraham Accords is a powerful symbolic statement of the rejection of Arab rejectionism. It is a fuller and more comprehensive casting of the Khartoum calumny on peace with Israel after the 1967 war to the wastebasket of history. Growing normalization with Israel will significantly augment military cooperation between the 2 countries. Listen, in addition, it will strengthen intelligence gathering and sharing capabilities and empower the Sudanese military to contend with and ultimately curtail the arms trafficking running through its ports and territorial waters. So it lists some of the turmoil that's been going on in Sudan. And it says, after years of shunning Israel, they realize it was to their detriment and seek to partner with the startup nation. Sudan can lead the way. It goes on to say Israel has been at the forefront of this shift. The Sudanese have correctly identified this area as a key component in reconstructing their agro-based economy to guarantee a sufficient food supply for their people. Listen, Israel, like Joseph in neighboring Egypt 3 millennia ago, can help. Sudan is a country slowly weaving its way to democracy. It is happening because its military leaders want it to happen and are carrying it in that direction. So who placed those military leaders there to make sure this goes through? It goes on to say for decades, Sudan was known not only for its civil wars and political unrest, but also as the capital of Arab and Muslim rejectionism. So it's the stronghold against Western imperialism, in other words. They then refer back to what happened in Khartoum when they declared the 3 no's: no peace, no recognition, and no negotiations. So this is the report after the meeting in February. Significant progress has been made towards signing a peace agreement. In his February 2, 2023 meeting with the Sudanese ruler, the Israeli foreign minister finalized the text of a formal agreement between the 2 countries. While Sudan formally joined the Abraham Accords following the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, relations were frozen due to domestic opposition and political instability. What does it look like right now? This comes from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Listen, Sudan, 10 months of conflict. Key facts and figures. This is as of 15 February 2024. What's going on? 10 months after war erupted between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces on 15 April 2023. So just a few months later. Sudan is facing one of the fastest unfolding crises globally, with unprecedented needs emerging in such a short period. About 25 million people, of whom over 14 million are children, need humanitarian assistance and support. Of course, this wasn't front page news because Ukraine was the major headline during that time. This article from Haaretz says Sudan has become a catastrophe. Israel can and should help. It says not only can Israel lead by example by sending humanitarian aid missions to Sudan, where a startling 25 million people are at risk, but it is also within Israel's political, economic, and security interests to preserve stability there. It says, in the months leading up to the outbreak of violence in Sudan, Israel's foreign minister was touting a breakthrough in formalizing relations with the country's military leadership. Sudan was on the brink of joining the Abraham Accords. Interesting, right? They can help, but they haven't. So, the agreement between Sudan and the State of Israel remains unratified. My question is this. If the United States is trying to broker a peace deal with the Israelis and Arab nations, why are they focusing on Sudan? Wouldn't they be considered an African nation? Apparently, I wasn't the only one asking this question. This comes from Literacy Project. It says, are Sudanese Arabs? It says Sudan, once the largest and one of the most geographically diverse states in Africa, split into two countries in July 2011 after the people of the South voted for independence. The government of Sudan gave its blessing for an independent South Sudan, where the mainly Christian and animist people had for decades been struggling against rule by the Muslim North. After the secession of the South, the Republic of Sudan became the third largest Arabic-speaking country in the region. Sudan is also a diverse country combining a variety of ethnicities and cultures. The country has attracted considerable media attention through time as a result of her dreadful series of civil wars. 2 rounds of North-South civil war cost the lives of 1.5 million people. The numbers are staggering. 1.5 million. And a continuing conflict in the western region of Darfur has driven 2 million people from their homes and killed more than 200,000. Ethnicity and identity among political factors are considered as central causes for the wars, which are often defined in the media as African versus Arab conflicts. So obviously there is more going on here than meets the eye. This comes from Business Day NG. It says Sudan, the land of the blacks and its many troubles. It says the name Sudan derives from the Arabic Balad al-Sudan, which translates as the land of the blacks. There is a sad irony pertaining to that truthful description of the ownership and original identity of the land. It says Sudan is the meeting point between the black man and the Arab on the African continent. It is also the center of what many Pan-Africanists suspect as a determined effort by the Arab world to wipe out the footprint of the black race as an initiator of and contributor to human civilization. 4 decades ago, controversial Nigerian literary critic Chinweizu made an urgent cry out to the world that the happenings in Sudan were not only designed to scrub out the imprint of the black man from his rightful place in human history, but to annihilate the black race from the earth and take over his land and his history entirely. Now, most of us focus on white supremacy, and it is a major factor in this game. But we have to understand that race, ethnicity, and religion are used as pawns to bring out the desired goals of the ruling elite. Those factors are used to erase the undesirables. If you want to see how serious this identification of whiteness is, just listen to this from ABC News. To understand China, you need to understand whiteness. Yet, it's missing from the conversation. This came out in October of 2022. Didn't you think we were beyond race? Think again. It says it is not possible to understand China without understanding race and racism, specifically without understanding whiteness. Yet far too often the conversation around the rise of this new superpower is in predominantly geopolitical terms, about authoritarianism versus democracy, about human rights, or whether we will go to war. But race sits at the heart of it all. We were reminded this week when China described the AUKUS agreement between Australia, the UK, and the US as a race-based military bloc of white countries. China's ambassador to Australia says that's how it appears to people in other countries. What he means are non-white countries. Listen, it says the Chinese Communist Party has a deep racial consciousness. It is there in the reminder to its people never to forget the 100 years of humiliation at the hands of foreign powers, of white powers. Yes, that humiliation was at the hands of the Japanese too, but the Japanese themselves cannot be separated from the project of whiteness. So an author named Michael Kivak wrote a book about how the Chinese stopped being white. He says in early interactions between Europeans and Asians, the Chinese were actually described as white. This was before racialized thinking was popularized in the 18th century. It was then that scientists started to divide the world up into groupings of color. Color denoted civilization. At the top were white Europeans, at the bottom, black people, and all others, graded on a sliding scale. So Kivak says Asians, including the Chinese and Japanese, began to darken. They lost their whiteness, he says, when it became clear they would remain unwilling to participate in European systems of trade, religion, and international relations. The fall of the Qing Empire in the 19th century hastened a racial reckoning for the Chinese. This was a dark night of the soul. It would tip China into a century of upheaval, revolution, and violence on an industrial scale. But listen, it says it also brought China face to face with white power. Now, I guess the Chinese would have an issue with not being classified as white when South Asians are. Listen to this from Quartz, and you all hang in there because I'm going somewhere with this, and you will see that something else is at the root in Sudan. This says for 1 year, all the South Asians in the U.S. were considered white. So with that being said, it shouldn't be surprising that the U.S. Census sees Middle Eastern and North African people as white. Pause and think on that, because some Middle Easterners are much darker than us. It says the history of classifying South Asians in the United States is fraught. For most of the 20th century, the census and courts did not consider South Asians as a distinct race, in part because their numbers were negligible. So in 1970, the U.S. Census decided South Asians were white. So racially designating South Asians, especially from the Indian subcontinent, is complicated. It says India is home to more than 2,000 ethnic groups. In the early 1900s, scholars believed that a major ancestral group, the Aryans, migrated to the subcontinent from Europe. They indisputably integrated into Indian culture. The Mahabharata, one of the most well-known ancient Indian epics, tell the story of Aryan warriors who fought among their families for political and spiritual legitimacy. They grouped into an elite fair-skinned class, possibly explaining the diversity in skin tones of Indians today. But how do you explain this? This is from the Wilson Center. It says the history behind Sudan's identity crisis. The author says Sudan, the ancient land of the Kushite and Nubian civilizations, is situated in the northeast of Africa and has a long history of cultural ties to the nearby Arabian Peninsula, including a history of Arab influence that impacted Sudan's national identity. When Arabs arrived in the area in the 7th century, they called it Bilad al-Sudan, which is Arabic for land of the blacks. So the Arabs are not native to this land. It says the Nubians had Africoid facial features and their skin color ranged from jet black to various shades of dark and medium brown. These racial characteristics are still the reality for Sudanese people today. The gradual Arab intermixture with the indigenous black Sudanese has not substantially altered their appearance. Despite the fact that there are a few Sudanese who are relatively lighter skinned, the majority are dark skinned. This begs the question, how could there be anti-blackness in a country where everyone looks the same? Well, just look at South Africa to answer that question. Let's go on. How is it bad to be black in a country literally named Land of the Blacks? How is there anti-blackness when everyone's black? So those considered to be Arabs are just as dark as the Kushite and the Nubians. But listen, to understand Sudan's identity crisis, it is important to have a general knowledge of Sudan's political history and how events of the past century have affected the country. In the 20th century, North and South Sudan were ruled as a single country under a joint colonial relationship between the United Kingdom and Egypt. This period of colonial rule forced the Sudanese people to see themselves as a unified nation, whereas previously they had been living in self-governing tribes. British colonial policies favored a narrow elite group from within Arab communities who were largely Muslim and Arab speaking. As a result, Ever since Sudan's independence in 1956, the Northern Arabs have been the country's ruling elite. So when you hear them talking about bringing Sudan to the table for peace talks, they are really talking about bringing the Arabs to the table because they are in control of the nation. So it says the practice of slavery in Sudan was abolished by the British administration in 1924, supposedly. It wasn't abolished. They left a system in place to maintain their control. It says, however, many of the men and their families who strongly opposed this decision continued to wield enormous influence in Sudan after independence, entrenching notions of Arab superiority in the new state by reserving almost all jobs for Arabs and failing to develop areas inhabited by black people. Today, in any government department or bank in Khartoum, one rarely sees a black person in an important role. And outside of urban areas, where the population is primarily black, the region is overwhelmingly underdeveloped. It goes on to say the superiority complex of many members of the Arab elite lies at the heart of some of the worst conflicts to hit Sudan since independence, as black people either demand equality or their own homeland. Sudan experienced two civil wars between the North and the South, leading to the South officially seceding in 2011 and forming South Sudan. Meanwhile, the conflict in Sudan's western region of Darfur has been described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis by the United Nations and a genocide against non-Arab pastoralist ethnic groups. I hope you're hearing this. Now let's go on because we need to understand some things. The article says here, the colorism shows up in many ways, including when parents tell their children not to befriend kids coming from the South, when adults tell young girls not to stay out in the sun too long for fear of becoming dark and ugly, when media outlets describe petty criminals as Negroes since they are perceived to be poor, and when parents forbid their daughters from marrying an Abid, a derogatory term used against dark-skinned Sudanese that means slave. This article from Al Jazeera is asking the question, are Arabs white? It says, although designated by law, Arabs in the U.S. are not extended the array of privileges associated with whiteness. But that's just it. The powers that be are now extending this to them. They are offering the golden cup. They want to unite and come together to bring about peace. Listen to this from This is Africa. It says, the Arabs and the black skin, dynamics of racial identity. It says what it means to be black in the Arab world today lies at the complex intersection of religion, race, and class. There have been numerous cases of racial discrimination in the Arab world. The media often show pictures of light-skinned Arabs usually classified as white. This is despite the history of most Arab nations being occupied by black-skinned people. So here's the question. Arabs have black skin, a lot of them. They have a different religion and their customs and traditions are not the same as Europeans or the other nations considered to be white nations. Why are certain European nations trying to broker peace with Arabs living in African countries like Sudan, South Africa? Why is there a push to classify these folks with dark melanated skin as white? Because the powers that be are doing the same thing to them that they did to the poor Europeans who came here when they colonized this nation. They are offering them the golden ticket. They're using whiteness as a weapon against us because race, religion, nationality, customs, and class are outlier issues. The players behind the scenes are not looking at those things. They are looking at bloodline. All of this is a fulfillment of Psalm 83, 1 through 4. It has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, or religion. No, they are forming a coalition, and they are made up of different races, religions, and ethnicity. The golden ticket is white privilege. So what we see happening is a coming together of the descendants of the folks being referenced in this passage. Let's read it. Do not keep silent, O Yah. Do not hold your peace and do not be still, O Yah. For behold, your enemies, his enemies, make a tumult, and those who hate you, those who hate him, have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, us, and consulted together against your sheltered one, his hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. I hope you're getting this. The rulers of darkness know the impending judgment is close at hand. We were scattered, and it served as our punishment, but we were also hidden, and it served as a level of protection for us, or they would have erased all of us by now. So they're trying to unite and build up their army, but it's a setup. When they say peace, then comes sudden destruction. So listen to this from Arab News, and this just came out this month. It says, in today's world, in order to take care of the prosperity, welfare, and security of our citizens, we have to build strong partnerships across the world. We can now celebrate one more successful year in the building of ties between Europe and Saudi Arabia. We have many common interests. We want to enhance mutual trade and investments and increase travel and cultural exchanges between Europe and Saudi Arabia. We are interested in peace and stability in the Gulf, the wider Middle East, and throughout the world. We want to preserve our environment and make sure that we run our economies in a sustainable way, minimizing any damage that human activity causes to our planet. So it says the EU has decided to enhance its partnership with Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf countries to a new level. On May 18 last year, we adopted a document on a strategic partnership with the Gulf, which aims to broaden and deepen the relationship between the EU and the Gulf countries. Both sides have a lot to gain from this partnership. The EU is the world's largest single market, a leader in research and innovation, an important security actor, and the leading actor on global challenges such as climate change and digitalization. So Saudi Arabia, it says, is a rapidly developing, dynamic economy and an increasingly important gateway between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The kingdom plays a crucial role in the energy markets and is an important partner in developing mutual strategies to meet climate commitments. Saudi Arabia is conducting active diplomacy to address the political and security concerns in the region and is an influential actor in the multilateral arena. So here is what we need to understand. When they say peace, they are talking about peace between those who hate Yah and his people. They are invested in keeping us from being a nation again. They are not talking about peace for all people. Otherwise, you would see Sudan plastered across the news channels like you see the other two nations taking up all of the airtime. And those who are not descendants of the ancient Israelites, they will have some tough decisions to make. They will have a Rahab moment because there will be no middle ground. But this has to happen. It's the separation of the sheep from the goats. Again, this has nothing to do with ethnicity and race. It's about a bloodline and those who choose to cleave to them. So just know that the Most High is going to regather his people and restore some things. Our identity, our nationality, and our homeland. If you're a nation, you need a homeland, right? We're citizens of the kingdom of Israel, or Yasharel. We didn't renounce our citizenship. Listen to this: ethnicity versus race versus nationality. What is nationality? While race and ethnicity are a tangled mess that becomes more difficult to understand the harder you try, nationality is fairly simple. Nationality is defined as the legal citizenship of a nation state, pure and simple. It's pretty straightforward. You either are or are not a citizen of a nation state. Again, we did not renounce our citizenship. Yes, there's a lot more to this, but we will end with this passage from Jeremiah 9:23 through 24. It says, "Thus says the Most High, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches. But let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Most High, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these I delight, says the Most High." So we know that the powers that be are glorying in their own wisdom. They trust in their might, their weapons, and they're seducing people with riches, white privilege. But in the end, it's going to fail. So we have to put our trust in Yah and his word, because he already told us how all of this is going to end. So we will continue to watch and pray and keep our eyes on Sudan. All right, we will continue with the rest of this next time. If this message has been a blessing to you, please remember to hit the like, share it, and you're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. Join me next time.